Battletoads was a platformer game created by Tim and Chris Stamper and their studio, Rare. It was first created for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1991. It was also considered a rival to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games and starred 3 humanoid toads, Rash, Zit, and Pimple. The game was given the title of Overall Best Game for the Nintendo Entertainment System of 1991. It was also nominated for the 1991 Nintendo Power Awards in 9 categories, actually winning first place in the following categories: Graphics and Sound. Who could forget that catchy theme music, or the pause menu theme? The other categories included Best Play Control and Best Multiplayer or Simultaneous Game. No matter how much acclaim Battletoads received for being such a great game of its time, it is still one of the hardest games ever created for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This game came out years ago, so a person would think that now, since most of us who got this game as kids and are now adults, we would have the skills to play Battletoads a lot more easily than before. However, that is far from the truth. Many people still cannot play this game to the very end, to this very day. The most difficult levels of the game are the obstacle courses and racing levels, where the player must have quick reflexes and dodge a series of obstacles that comes in their way while flying or driving at high speeds. There are also a few levels where the player must outrun an enemy that can instantly kill them. These levels usually require the player to play them multiple times and memorize where the objects are. The difficulty in the game quickly becomes a drawback. Why is Battletoads so hard to beat? It is because this game is not balanced. Battletoads is not consistent with the difficulty of its levels. It goes from a somewhat fair difficulty in the first 2 levels and then becomes very difficult in the 3rd level. It becomes too frustrating. According to Ernest Adams in his book Fundamentals of Game Design, a balanced game is fair to the player or players, is neither too easy nor too hard, and makes the skill of the player the most important factor in determining his success. According to the flow theory by Six and Mihaly, the challenge of this game is high enough to make the player frustrated. How would the problem of balance be fixed? Since the game was released for the Nintendo Entertainment System, it would be remade for the Wii as a download and also as a game for the DS. First thing to implement would be that the player would be able to choose the difficulty of the game between easy, medium, and hard. If the player chose easy, it would be programmed so that the player would be harder to be hit by enemies, meaning if an enemy hit you, you would take little damage, especially in the first levels. Of course, enemies would hit harder over time and over different levels, so not as to bore the player. The same idea about the easy difficulty would also be applied to the medium difficulty. However, enemies would be able to hit you even more hard. Lastly, the hard difficulty would be what the game Battletoads is already, how it is originally. This would be for the hardcore gamers. The original game is great, players should experience what made this game so famous. The next thing to be added would be saves between each level. The 3 lives will still be implemented. However, when the player loses, they do not have to start the game completely over due to the save system. Another thing to be put into the game to help balance it would be collectibles. However, they would only be implemented into the easy and medium difficulties. What these collectibles would do would be to help the player out within levels. There are already a few collectibles in the game, including flies you can eat for health, and 1-ups. The flies would be tweaked to add more health instead of just 1 square. Another collectible would slow the level down, specifically in levels where the player has to control a vehicle. However, these collectibles will be limited and somewhat hard to get. This way, the game can still be challenging and not bore the player. The last thing to tweak in the game to help with balance is the two-player mode, so that when you play with another person, the game is not twice as hard to play. You would think having a second player would help, but in actuality it makes the game even more difficult. In two-player mode, the players can actually hit each other. When both players are punching the same enemy, one player can easily punch the other player and make them fly across the screen, or even punch them to their death. In the remade game, being able to hit each other would be taken out in the easy and medium difficulties. However, it would not be implemented in the hard difficulty. The fact that if one player dies, both players lose the game will also be taken out of the easy and medium difficulties. If player 2 died because they missed the jump and fell to their death, the level would start over for both players. It is too unfair to the players. As a note, to implement two-player mode for the DS, the game would do what the game Super Mario Bros. Does. The Mario game allows you to connect to another player wirelessly. What the Mario game does is allow players to connect to each other wirelessly. The DS searches for another person on a DS nearby and allows you to let the other person join your game. The other player does not even have to own the game. By fixing the balancing in Battletoads, the game will become more enjoyable and open up to more players. Players will be able to actually beat the game and see it to its fullest.